Yeah, Monday. What's up, everybody? Monday morning. Welcome to today's edition of the Daily Market Commentary. I'm your host, Chuck Fulkerson. Hope everybody had a productive weekend, stayed home, did the part. I know that we are all still continuing to figure out what to do with this. What seems to be something that's going to extend a bit longer, as yesterday President Trump came out and extended his recommendations, or the country's recommendations, until the end of April. Essentially, April 30th was really the next date for the social distancing guidelines to take effect. So the market reacted to that, gapping down and then rallying back up. And so we've got a couple of levels in here that we're going to review, specifically the S&P and the Nasdaq, that were from last night's live trade room. So if you were with us last night in the live trade room, hopefully you made a little bit of we'll call it smiling, happy kick off the day money, as we caught this little breakout trade from 75.04, and it hit its target up there at 76.49. So, I say a little bit of breakout money, but it was about 150 points in the Nasdaq, which is a pretty nice little run. And then we hit our supply level and got to move right back down to the opposing demand zone, which is exactly where we got in. So actually, those both the long and the short worked out extremely well in this scenario. So same trade, by the way, on the ES. Now that level that I have there that I've got highlighted is actually a 15-minute wick over wick supply level. Now, what caused this move to come up from here? Well, if I go to my 60-minute chart, this was from Friday's daily market commentary. Leave me a comment down below if you were able to catch Friday's daily market commentary wick over wick demand zone and run this thing all the way up, because that was really a really nice setup and a nice trade. Now, we've got to take both of those levels off my charts, because both of those levels are no longer valid. Something I think that is important is this. I'll call this a line in the sand, this area down here, because this is what keeps us in an uptrend. Technically, on a 4-hour chart, we are in an uptrend. However, if this puts in a new pivot high and we fall and get below here, then our uptrend will be over. As a matter of fact, we have put in even a little bit of a head and shoulders pattern here with the rising neckline. So, I think that we got to see what happens throughout the week. I think that we are in between areas of supply and demand. On the ES, my next really good level of supply is the hourly level that comes into play up in here. Now, this was formed at a terrible time of day, but it's a pretty strong level overall based on the structure of the trade. And that was a news announcement that caused that. I think that was right before President Trump came out and addressed the nation on his first address, national address around the coronavirus. But I think that would be our next quality level of supply as we hit this one on Friday. So those of you that were participating with us on Friday were able to catch this one. A lot of people have been saying that these markets are behaving erratically, and I would actually disagree. I would say that from a technical perspective, it's actually behaving, I guess is the word that I would use, in a way that's been remarkably I don't want to say predictable, but it's been turning it at fairly high quality levels of supply and demand. And so if you're fairly new to trading and you don't look at this on a regular basis, go back for the last 10 days or so and just look at our levels in the ES and see how well this market has responded to some of these technical levels. It's been pretty amazing. But when I look at what I have today, I don't really have anything clean for me to lean on, because we've already hit the levels that came from last night's live trade room. I don't really know how much else there is for me to add, aside from if we get basing in front of this level here for a potential breakdown below this 2487, right around 2500 level. Nasdaq, very similar picture, although I don't like the breakdown quite as much inside of the Nasdaq. So I would leave that one be just a little bit. One of them that we looked at last night in the trade room was the Russell's actually a little bit stronger, and the Dow Jones as well also had the same supply level and has gotten to move away. So all of our markets are in a very similar place where we've traded to the top of that level, and now we don't really have any quality zones at the moment. So it might be a good day to take a look for those of you that do credit spreads on these indices, it might be a good day to look at some sort of a credit spread on the indices for a one-day trade, right? The SPX credit spread or something like that. All right. Next, looking at crude oil. So in crude oil, we are chopping sideways here just a little bit. If you're so inclined and want to try a breakdown below this 2012 area, you certainly can. We're getting a bit of basing here, so that might be worth giving a go. We had a really nice breakdown here on Friday, and I know a lot of you were able to catch that and get a good move down. So the next one would be the breakdown below this 2012. Gold is really just chopping sideways. There's nothing for me to talk about or look at here in gold. Nothing that I see that is worth diving into beyond what we've already done. We're in a sideways price pattern. Markets have to move pretty strong one way or the other before I'd be interested in really anything in gold. Let's go take a look at our bonds and currency markets. So in the ZN, we were looking last night at this ZN level for a potential breakout to the upside. And we did get a little bit of a touch up above here. And then it pulled back a smidge, and now we have rallied up beyond. So you may or may not have gotten into this one. If you think that this was a decent little level, you may have gotten in at the European market open on that big move. I don't know that I got enough basing in front of that level to justify it, and frankly, I wasn't awake, and so I didn't set that trade up ahead of time. That's not a set it and forget it one that I had lined up. But I will say, keep a look at this area here and see if we get a reversal off of this level today. That could be a decent little spot to get long. Looking at the Aussie, the Australian dollar, we have rallied up. Have a little bit of a supply area here. I'm not a huge fan of the fact that I have this basing here, which actually normally looks like a breakdown. This is actually usually one of the breakdown, patterns that I like to see, where we've got lower highs here and the same lows. I'm not saying that I would take the breakdown in this instance, although our 4-hour upward trend, we do definitely have a 4-hour upward trend. I can see that my momentum is waning in that 4-hour upward trend, as I've got higher highs in price and essentially the same highs in the MACD. That tells me that my 4-hour upward trend is waning. Doesn't mean that it's over, by the way. Doesn't mean that our upward trend has ended by any stretch of the imaginations, but just be aware of that. If this demand area fails and we drop below here, then we've got to certainly consider that. So, at this moment, I still say that the demand area makes more sense. This little 15-minute area of demand that I've got identified, but it may not work for very long. And you could even take a breakdown from here into here, and then so take that little profit margin. The euro, very similar look as we're coming up on the 4-hour chart to this. This is the closest area of supply that we have. Now this came from an area that was a breakdown in the past. That was a pretty good little trade, pretty good little level. Looking at that as our next supply area up above us in the 4-hour, and the fact that we're in a big picture upward trend tells me that my better trades are still going to be opportunities to get long. I just don't have a good setup at the moment. And once again, like the Australian dollar, this one is reducing its momentum just a little bit on the way up. Canadian dollar, we had a breakdown of our Canadian dollar trade last night. So this was a trade from last night's live trade room, as the Canadian dollar of all of our currencies we've looked at so far is kind of leading us in the weakness. So the downside could continue in the Canadian dollar. So as this has a potential for continued downside movements, you'd be looking for 704 as really the target inside of the Canadian dollar. Last but certainly not least, Great British Pound and Japanese Yen. In the Great British Pound, we have a little bit of a demand area just below us that we're closing in on. I don't like the basing before the level. Remember what we call basing before the level. If you remember what basing before the level is, do me a favor, type it in the chat box. Always love to hear people using the comments down below. That would be awesome. And then the Japanese yen, we've got a little bit of a supply area or demand area down below us as we're in another upward trend in the yen, and it has a chance to kind of continue that movement. So All in all, a pretty active trade. This is, by the way, why we have a Sunday night trade room. If you're not part of Traders Army Sunday night trade room, I say, why in the world aren't you? Because it's a really, really good opportunity to start your week off right and get your markets rolling. But if you guys have any questions, as always, send us an email, support@tradersarmy.com, and I will talk to you soon. See ya.